So the recording is starting now. Again, this is mental well-being in the workplace, the laws and best practices for small businesses. And I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, who is Blake Woodall, Esquire. Blake is an experienced employment law attorney in San Diego County. He counsels and defends organizations in a wide range of labor and employment law matters. He has extensive experience representing employers in single and multi-plaintiff employment litigation, wage and hour class litigation, and private attorney general act claims. In addition to his litigation practice, Blake provides guidance to employees on federal and state compliance matters. Welcome, Blake Woodall.
Thank you, Kathy. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining me for this presentation today. Appreciate you taking time out of your lunch break to do that. It's always weird to hear my bio being talked about, because I can't remember half that stuff that that she mentioned. But yeah, I've been doing labor and employment law for quite a while, and I've actually done a number of presentations on this topic in particular. And what we're finding is that this has become an extremely important topic, particularly over the last year and a half, with respect to dealing with mental health issues in the workplace. And it's sort of a touchy-feely topic, I'll admit. I'm kind of a touchy-feely person, so it kind of it fits with my personality, and it's I don't have any issues with admitting that I myself have dealt with some mental health issues, and had to deal with that in terms of how it affects my family and how it affects my relationships and how it affects my productivity at work. And so it's kind of near and dear to my heart to talk about this topic, because I myself have had issues with it. And I'm sure some of you out there, statistically speaking, at least, some of you out there can probably relate. So again, why talk about this topic? Well, before all the COVID mess hit, I actually attended an HR luncheon up in Carlsbad, actually. And there was a CEO of a large company who got up and he began to speak about his own personal struggles with depression and anxiety, and how at one point he even was nearly hospitalized and institutionalized. I mean, he just laid it out in terms of his personal struggles with it. And here's this powerful CEO, right, of this big company, and he's up there being vulnerable, talking about this issue. Well, after going through some treatment and some therapy and things, he realized that he needed to implement some programs in his own work environment to assist his employees who were feeling the same way. And he started doing a lot of research, and he started talking to a lot of people about how to deal with this issue. And during his presentation, he talked about some eye-opening statistics about the number of people who struggle with mental illness or poor mental health. Then he talked about the successes from some of the programs that his company had implemented in terms of overall productivity, found that there were less disability claims, and also that there were lower healthcare costs associated with that he could directly attribute to some of these programs. And so at the end of the day, what he discussed was that while it helped his people, it also helped his bottom line from an employer standpoint. So that kind of piqued my interest, and I was sitting around a table with a number of HR professionals, and it really started this major discussion amongst the people at the table. And it dawned on me as I was listening and participating in the question or in the discussion, that this is what we're seeing now in litigation. And so part of my topic here, or part of my discussion, is going to include a summary. This is all sort of summary because we only have so much time here, but it's going to talk about some of the best practices that other businesses have done to, at the end of the day, help your people who work there, perhaps even help you yourself, even if you're an HR professional, or if you're in management, or you're an executive. Sometimes you're just expected to have it all together as well. Well, obviously, all of us are affected one way or the other with this topic. Um, so I also thought about a couple of cases that I actually had over the last couple of months, even now that I'm thinking about it. I had one case where a person who was an employee wanted to work remotely because he claimed that his daughter suffered from PTSD and trauma from a traumatic experience that had occurred a while before, and he needed to care for her. And so he requested to work remotely. Company didn't grant his request for a number of reasons, and I represented the company, and so I felt that those were righteous. That the guy, his job really required him to be out in the field as opposed to working remotely. But he made a claim nonetheless. And what we really found was his main sense of resentment or animosity towards the company was really the fact that the company didn't have really any program in place to help him. He just felt like he wasn't being assisted. He wasn't being helped in any way. So that was a big element of the case, and it was actually a big part of the case that hindered it from even being resolved. Another case that I had actually resolved it in mediation. I can talk a little bit about it. It was a claim, again, it was a claim for delayed grief. The former employee had actually suffered from another traumatic experience many years before, and he claimed that he had a delayed grief period to where it affected his productivity and his performance, and so he requested time off and an accommodation. And his allegation was that the company didn't do that. And regardless of the merits of those two cases, what they both alleged were mental disability discrimination, a failure to engage in what's called the interactive process, a failure to accommodate, and wrongful termination. And the common denominator with the allegations was that there was an insensitive and uncaring HR department, that there was no program in place, there was no support, there was no understanding or compassion. And so, regardless of the merits, again, I can't really get into those. These cases are popping up a lot, and they're popping up everywhere, and and we're just seeing them over and over now. So, so again, when I went to that luncheon, when I started thinking about my own cases, it just really piqued my interest. And so we had a symposium a few months ago, and I actually presented a similar presentation about this. And I myself even kind of dove deep into the issue of mental well-being. So today, what we're really going to talk about is first understanding mental health and mental illness. And let me get past my bio there. Let's get to this screen here. And I say, let's talk about it. And the reason why I say let's talk about it is because, well, oftentimes we don't. We pretend that it doesn't exist. We pretend it's not there. We have kind of a suck it up attitude. And it can actually lead to some issues with respect to you running your business. So I'm going to go over some statistics, I think some things that are relatively interesting, and then we're going to talk about some best practices. So understanding mental health and mental illness. While not always addressed, talked about, or always treated, mental health distress and mental illness, including general symptoms of depression, anxiety, stress, and substance abuse, are common, affecting individuals, their families, and yes, our coworkers. Different types of mental health distress include stress, grief, anxiety, and feelings of depression. Can anybody out there relate? I know I can. Now, these differ from mental illness in that they are not diagnosed conditions, but rather temporary feelings or experiences. Individual risk factors include changes at work, school, illness, injuries, or problems with relationships, family, money, or housing. Long-term or chronic stress can also contribute to mental health distress and mental illness, with effects on the heart, immune system, and hormones acting on the brain. Mental illness, as opposed to mental health distress, is also referred to as mental disorders, diagnoses, or conditions, refers collectively to all diagnosable mental health disorders, health conditions involving significant changes in thinking, emotions, and/or behavior, and/or distress and problems functioning in social, work, or family activities. Now, mental illness can often lead to requests for medical leave, work accommodations, and workers' compensation claims. So again, it all comes back around to its effect on the workplace and costs associated with running your business. Over 46 million Americans, or 1 in 5, live with a mental illness, and over 11 million Americans have a serious mental illness, which in many can result in functional impairment and impact life activities. This is a stat that I was not aware of until I dove into this a little bit, but mental illness is the #1 cause of disability in the United States. According to the World Health Organization, depression and anxiety alone have an estimated cost to the global economy of $1 trillion per year in lost productivity, with the direct impact on mental health in the US costing $500 billion of lost productivity annually. Mental illness such as depression are associated with higher rates of disability. Depression interferes with a person's ability to complete physical job tasks about 20% of the time and reduces cognitive performance about 35% of the time. Only 57% of employees who report moderate depression and 40% of those who report severe depression receive treatment. So what we're seeing is we're having a lot of folks who are suffering and suffering in silence at the end of the day, and basically only 50% of them are actually receiving some sort of help or treatment. Overall, mental health, mental illness, and substance use disorders are known drivers for lower productivity, increased healthcare costs, and higher mortality. Unemployment, stress at the workplace, and economic vulnerability are linked to increases in mental health distress. For example, a study done during the recession of 2008 found that for every 1% increase in unemployment in the US, researchers observed an approximate 1% increase in suicide. One of the first steps an employer must take is to let go of misconceptions about mental illness. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 50% of the population will be diagnosed with a mental health condition during their lifetime, and 1 in 25 live with a serious mental condition, such as major depression, schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder. So the odds are, looking at those statistics, that there are already employees with mental health conditions working in your organization. Okay. Now let's talk about the relationship between mental health, mental illness, and the workplace. It is important to acknowledge the impact of mental health on employee performance. You have to look at it now as something that's significant factor. Supporting mental health in the workplace increases productivity and decreases costs, like for healthcare and absenteeism. It is becoming more common for employers to recognize that mental health is an unaddressed issue. However, supporting mental health in the workplace continues to challenge many employers. A 2019 survey sent to employers and conducted by the Disability Management Employer Coalition found that 58% of respondents said they handle mental health issues well when they know about them, but they could be more proactive in spotting signs of employees at risk and intervening earlier. 50% say their organization does not provide training for managers on identifying mental health needs and making appropriate referrals for their employees. 55% said they communicate about mental health reactively, so they only when they're asked or when a specific issue arises. 66% of respondents are not tracking prevalence of mental health issues at all in their workplace. And 59% say stigma is a barrier for employers addressing mental health care. We're going to talk a little bit about stigma in a bit. The workplace itself has a profound impact on employee mental health and well-being. Chronic exposure to stressful workplace conditions can lead to a variety of mental health conditions, including experiences of depression, anxiety, an inability to concentrate, and emotional exhaustion. I don't know about you, but check all those boxes off in terms of things that I've personally experienced in the workplace. Um, Key factors include workload, so both excessive and insufficient work, lack of participation and control in the workplace, monotonous or unpleasant tasks, role ambiguity or conflict, lack of recognition, perceived inequity, poor interpersonal relationships, poor working conditions, poor leadership or communication, conflicting home and work demands, uncomfortable physical working conditions, so like extreme temperatures, poor scheduling, lack of ergonomic best practices, infrequent breaks, the list goes on. And also fatigue at work. Now, fatigue at work can be caused by long-term or chronic issues, all from the list above that we talked about. This was a staggering stat to me. One study found that untreated depression costs $9,450 per employee per year. So if you think about that for a second, the first $9,000 on average invested into an employee is dealing with the effects of that employee's depression or overall mental health issues. Less than half of all costs of depression are attributed to direct costs of treatment, with over half associated with direct costs to the workplace in terms of lost productivity, absenteeism, and disability. The Center for Workplace Mental Health found that over 80% of employees treated for mental illness reported improved levels of work efficacy and satisfaction. The World Health Organization led studies found that for every $1 invested in mental health treatment, there is a $4 return in improved health and productivity. Now, all these studies, I can't go into, a deep dive into them, but if you looked up these studies, they actually kind of describe how they come to these numbers, and the numbers seem to not lie. When there's money and time and resources invested into dealing with mental health in the workplace, there is a return on that investment in terms of improved health and productivity of the employees. When employees receive effective treatment, results include lower medical costs, increased productivity, lower absenteeism, and decreased disability claims. And I don't know about you, but when I deal with my clients, when I counsel them and I discuss certain issues with them, these are always huge issues. And so there's a direct link between the mental health of the employees and these issues with medical costs, productivity, absenteeism, and disability claims. All right. Oh, here we go. That's the impacts of COVID. Now, do I really need to say much about this? I don't know about you, but I can relate to both of those pictures there. I'm actually a single father, and I just dropped my second oldest off at college in New Jersey last week, so I'm still dealing with the mental health of doing that. But I have one still at home, and he's been doing the online distance learning since it's almost been a year now. I'm sure some of you out there can relate to this. So you have kids at home doing online learning from school closures. Even going to the grocery store seems to be a challenge with all the protocols and wearing masks, and can't do the things that we used to do to relieve stress. And what I've found just dealing with my friends and family and coworkers and just people that you run into, terms being used to describe people's mental condition over the last year are terms like weary, exhausted, fatigued, frustrated, tired, lonely, depressed, afraid, distressed, paralyzed, can't get out of bed. These are all things that my friends are talking about. And I was bumping around Facebook when I was preparing this presentation a while back, and I had a friend who it just struck me what she wrote, and she said, quote, "The ground could open up and swallow me today and I would just applaud." And I mean, I know that sounds kind of dramatic, and I don't want to be like a total bummer today and bum everybody out, but this is the reality of it. And it's just been extremely, extremely difficult dealing with the impacts of COVID-19 in our workplace, in our homes, in our communities. And so it really exacerbated the issues in dealing with it. And, you know, I can give you even a more personal example. Another thing that I do is I'm actually a high school football coach. I'm the quarterback coach and special teams coordinator at Hoover High School down in El Cajon. And dealing with the effects of COVID with my players and their families has been really impactful, and it's been difficult because sometimes we're open, we were able to practice, other times we're closed, and you know we're dealing with kids trying to stay eligible academically, and a lot of them are challenged because some of them don't have Wi-Fi and some of them don't have a computer, and some of them have two jobs because their parents lost their job. I had one of my players. I was kind of giving him a hard time because he was failing a couple of his classes, and he said, "Well, coach, I got to go to work at noon, and I got to go to work at 8 o'clock later tonight." He has two jobs, one at Wendy's and another one at a copying service. And so, you know, and then I had another player who said, "Well, coach, I gotta watch my 5-year-old sister so my parents can go work." Um, and so my point in that is that all of the effects of that's going on at home, and the inability to relieve some of that stress with things that we normally would do, like for them to go out and practice and run around a little bit, that all impacts their uh, their well-being when they go to work, right? Or it impacts their parents. Their parents are stressed out. How do I figure out what to do with my kids while I have to go to work? I mean, I deal with that. I go into the office and I've got my 14-year-old here doing 8th grade online, and he's here almost all day. And so I won't belabor the point, but I think probably you all can relate to this, and it's just really caused um, an increase in universal struggle amongst employees with anxiety, stress, loneliness, and depression. Then you also have folks that are remote. You know, it seems like now everything is going remote, right? And so businesses and employers are deciding, well, hey, we can save a little bit of money here on our bottom line by um, on rent and lease. We don't have to lease a place. We can have people work remote. And I certainly understand that from a business standpoint. It makes sense. But what you're finding too is you're having loneliness and depression related to remote work now, with the employees not being able to socialize and not being able to get out and be with their coworkers. And so all of those things combined have just created this huge influx of mental health issues in the workplace. So the impacts of COVID-19 have been significant, and we hope and pray that some of that will change here hopefully soon. Not to mention, of course, you have the civil unrest that happened, the election. You know, everybody was really looking forward to 2021 and 2000 because 2020 was the worst year ever, right? And 2021 said, "Here, hold my beer, I got this." So it's just been nuts, and all the craziness of this, and it's really just become an issue. So the one silver lining of this, however, is that mental health support has become now a top concern for employers as more employees struggle. So hopefully that'll trend upwards as well, that there will be more support. All right, let's talk about stigma and other barriers to success. I kind of like this. I like this slide because it shows you, you know, this is what happens. This is what people feel like when they want to try to express that they're struggling and have issues. They're afraid everybody's going to point their finger and they're going to judge and take advantage of that vulnerability. Stigma about mental health and illness is a significant barrier that prevents people who need support from reaching out. Negative stereotypes, prior negative consequences of being vulnerable, implicit biases, and attitudes of judgment and dismissiveness are present in the workplace. Some common fears of employees include: if I report that I'm experiencing mental health distress or have mental illness, I'll be fired or I'll experience other negative consequences at work. My stress level is too high and I'm not really doing well, but that's just part of the job. And I can tell you that that's in my job. I can't count how many times I've said that. And that's just part of being a lawyer, right? Stress, pressure filled, no big deal. It's just part of it. I don't know where to find help. I don't trust anyone here to help me. That's common. This too shall pass. This is normal. And I don't need to see a doctor or a counselor. So it's the denial and just push it away. Now, employers too, they fall prey to mindsets like mental illness or mental health is a private issue, not one that concerns employers. We can't prioritize mental health. That will reduce productivity because more people will take time off or take advantage of the system. Changing culture is hard and it will just take too long and we just can't prioritize it right now. We have too much stuff going on. And then you got the classic suck it up, buttercup, something. And there's something to be said. Sometimes that is true. We all sort of need to suck it up at times, right? But if that's your general philosophy on dealing with issues at work with your employees, you're going to have some issues. So a huge barrier to success is that addressing mental health in the workplace requires a continuous effort. The programs and solutions need to be comprehensive and long-term. The only way to overcome the employee and employer hesitations is through commitment, communication, and a willingness to take action. Research has shown that education and training related to mental health have more positive impacts on the views of people who are experiencing mental health distress. So in other words, awareness and education actually removes the stigma attached. So the more, I wrote here in my notes, the more you know, the more you care. And I can just tell you, just on an individual personal basis, I find that that's true if I'm talking to somebody. The more I get to know them, the more I learn about them, the more I tend to care about them. Okay, so you're saying, well, Blake, that's fine, all well and good. There's issues going on, and we understand the difference between mental health and mental disorders, and we more than understand the effects that COVID-19 has had on that, and we understand the stigma. And what do we do? Is there anything to do? So this section is taking action strategies for addressing mental health in the workplace. Efforts to address mental health and mental illness in the workplace should, one, assume the presence of employees living with a mental illness, and employers should develop policies, programs, and procedures accordingly. Similarly, efforts toward building a psychologically safe workplace should assume the same and ensure that all language is inclusive, stigma-free, and supportive. Again, this is my touchy-feely part of this, but it's incredibly important to create a psychologically safe environment in the workplace. One residual effect of creating a supportive culture is avoiding discrimination and harassment claims associated with mental health issues. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just kind of the right thing to do to take some action and to address this issue. But it also has some residual benefits from it, like avoiding lawsuits and avoiding claims and avoiding disability claims, avoiding workers' compensation claims, all those types of things. There is a residual benefit from it. So the general characteristics of a psychologically safe workplace include leadership. Okay, this is the number one thing in doing this is leadership, the tone at the top. It's got to come from leadership above. Leadership that is engaged with employees, asks questions, and attentively listens to feedback. Training managers and supervisors to avoid blaming and judgmental reactions when mistakes happen or when challenges occur. Decision-making processes that actually include employees, and promoting a culture and aligning policies to reduce concern about repercussions when asking for help, being creative, or admitting mistakes, all of which can be perceived as risky if the workplace isn't psychologically safe. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's the responsibility of an employer, including HR professionals. So your HR department or the executive team, management team, that's not your job or responsibility to diagnose mental health conditions. I'm like, for example, I'm not a professional in that area, so far be it for me to do that. However, HR professionals, supervisors, managers, executive teams, etc., should be trained on a variety of topics, including basics of mental health and mental illness, recognizing signs and symptoms of stress, mental health distress, and mental illness, how to respond to a mental health crisis, understanding how to help employees access services, so referring them to the HR department or employee assistance program, motivational interviewing, and other active listening techniques, creating a culture of trust, support, and confidentiality. That's important. Understanding how stigma and fear of judgment negatively impact employees who need to seek help. Now, more specific to HR functions, so some of you out there are HR people or in charge of or have to deal with some HR issues. More specific to those HR functions include ensuring health benefits provide strong coverage of mental health or mental illness services. And if there's folks out there that are, say, insurance brokers or agents, and they issue policies of insurance to organizations, you know, talk about that type of coverage, making sure that that's included in their coverage, because it's important to be able to have those kinds of services available. Ensuring the employee assistance program has excellent support mechanisms in place for supporting employees who are in need of mental health or mental illness related services. Repeatedly sharing support resources with employees through multiple mediums and in a digestible, easy to understand way with clear instructions on how to access them. And there's all kinds of support resources out there, whether it be organizational, local, and national. There's a lot of it out there. Ensure that medical leave policies and sick time explicitly cover mental health and mental illness related time off. Because if it doesn't, and you don't provide time off and you don't try to accommodate folks, you don't engage in an interactive process, you will end up getting a mental health disability claim filed against you. There's just no question about it. Consider adding mental health days to encourage employees to prioritize their mental health and well-being and seek support when needed. All right, so there's some legal issues. I'm not going to get too crazy into the legal issues, but the basics are that mental health conditions are protected from discrimination and harassment in the workplace per the ADA. Employees with mental health conditions have privacy rights. Employees with mental health conditions may have a legal right to a reasonable accommodation. An employer cannot fire an employee because the employee has a mental health condition, and harassment based on mental health condition is unlawful. Now, mental health conditions can trigger compliance with requirements under the ADA, as I just mentioned, but also California's Fair Employment and Housing Act and the Family and Medical Leave Act. Briefly, I'll focus on the FEHA, which is what governs California. The FEHA's definition of a disability is broad, and it encompasses a wide range of physical and mental conditions. Generally, a condition that limits a major life activity will be considered a disability. The term limits a major life activity is broadly interpreted and basically means that the activity is more difficult to perform than compared to the general population. Particularly in California, all of these laws are written in the light most favorable to the employee. So you need to keep that in mind if you are an employer dealing with these issues in California. The laws will always favor the employee. So for example, an anxiety attack, a PTSD episode, major depression, or other mental health event may qualify as a disability under the FEHA. And the FEHA offers protection to an employee if he or she has an impairment that limits a major life activity, is regarded to have a past impairment, to be currently impaired, or having a condition that may become a limiting impairment in the future. So it covers past, present, and future. And also if the employee has a record of impairment or is associated with someone who has such an impairment. For example, the case that I'd mentioned at the beginning of this presentation about the employee who wanted to work remotely to deal with his daughter's mental health issues. That actually might qualify as a person who's protected under the FEHA because he was associated with someone who has such an impairment and needed to provide care for them. A key to complying with these laws with regard to mental health conditions is communication. Sounds cliche, communication is the key to all relationships, right? Well, it's true here too. Both to determine the qualification and need for benefits and to try to provide an appropriate reasonable accommodation. So an employer has 4 responsibilities, and I call it the tightrope. This isn't easy, it's not clear cut, but so here's the tightrope. 1 is to recognize situations in which an employee's behavior is creating difficulties in the workplace, and that's related to performance. Okay, so you're seeing an issue with performance. 2 would be to engage in a discussion with the employee to identify assistance that will help him or her perform the job and to manage any kind of mental health conditions he or she is dealing with without actually raising the term mental health. Okay, so this is where you can discuss accommodations, and don't be afraid here to be creative and flexible. Be consistent in the approach to these conversations and in the way that discipline is applied. Trust me, if you have 5, 10, 15, 1,000 employees, you have to be consistent in the way you deal with this because the employees talk and they'll say, well, this is how they dealt with it with me, and this is how they dealt with it with me. And if it differs, then boom, you're then going to be faced with some sort of harassment or discrimination because you're not consistently applying the rules or your guidelines. And then 4 would be to obviously maintain the confidentiality of the employee's medical information. So what you do is you first talk about employment, and then I talk about the 5 key words is how can I help you? If you really truly want to assist one of your employees, it's how can I help you? And those simple 5 words will go a long way in communicating to the employee that you are available for a conversation as to what he or she might need to overcome the mental health issues that they're dealing with and that are affecting their job performance. Be prepared for an emotional reaction, whether it's surprise or anger or denial, defensiveness, extreme sadness, crying, and just give the employee an opportunity to talk. The employee might also be afraid and not likely admit to having a problem. And you cannot assume a medical issue, but you are allowed to address the performance issues. So that's where this tightrope is. It's managing the difference between caring and prying. If the employee says nothing or denies any problems, you have to end the conversation there. It is okay to ask if the employee is okay and whether the employee is having any challenges at work to gain confidence and trust, and then use this time as a good opportunity to share available resources through the employee assistance program. Ask if there's anything or any way to help. It's really just a way to show the employee that the employer cares about the performance and about them as a person. So you want to be legally compliant, but you also want to be human. So here's the key in terms of dealing with the legal issues. It's be open to mental health and not afraid to have needed conversations. Statistics support that employers who have had success in helping employees manage mental health challenges are those whose leaders have invited the conversation. I have a little saying. This is where you can put the human in human resources. So that may not all be applicable to some of you folks out there, but I did want to at least address some of the legal issues and how to deal with employees who are showing issues in terms of performance that may be related to their mental health. Okay, so the next is support. We've got your back. And really, I wanted to, at this point, talk about and give some examples that specific companies are doing and have been really seen as success stories reported by these companies. And some of these companies are monster companies. They've got unlimited resources, and so I certainly understand the limitations that some people might have in terms of the resources they have. And some of these are smaller companies. So I'm not saying that you've got to do this. It's something you have to do. They're not necessary procedures or practices, but they're just, I think, that are interesting in terms of what some of these companies have done. So for example, Prudential Financial, they monitor the effect of supervisors on worker well-being, especially when supervisors change. So they conduct ongoing anonymous surveys to learn about attitudes towards managers, senior executives, and the company as a whole. And they normalize discussion of mental health by having senior leadership share personal stories and video messages. Now, some of you might be like, no way, not doing that. And I get that too. But what they are finding is that when, a certain population of that organization is open and honest about their struggles, it leads to a conversation to allow other people to be open as well. And it kind of goes back to that guy, that CEO of that large company. I mean, man, that guy was as open and honest as anybody I've ever seen about this issue, and he was the top guy. So their notice, Prudential Financial, at least, is showing it's seeing signs of a benefit from that. Tier 1 Performance Solutions focuses on 6 key health issues. So they focus on depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and addictions as part of its Start the Conversation About Mental Illness Awareness campaign. They also provide resources to assess risk, find information, and get help or support using multiple formats to increase visibility and engagement. For example, information is provided in infographics, emails, weekly table tents with reflections and challenges, and videos. So they're educational and they're storytelling, and they're done in a bunch of different mediums. So hopefully they hit everybody. Some people don't watch videos, but they read emails. Some people don't read email, but they watch videos, things like that. Beehive PR maintains what's called the In Zone, which is a dedicated quiet room that is not connected to a wireless internet signal. It gives employees a place to recharge. They combine professional and personal growth opportunities through goal setting, one-on-one coaching, development sessions, and biannual retreats. Now, the quiet room thing is becoming, I'm finding at least, it's becoming something that a lot of employers are using, and they're finding that it's successful. Like this, there's no wireless internet, so the person isn't tempted to go online and keep checking emails while they're just trying to get away for a little bit. So that's actually been a popular tool that a lot of companies are using. Tripler Army Medical Center requires resiliency training to reduce burnout and increase skills in empathy and compassion for staff members who are in caregiver roles. Training sessions mix classroom-style lectures, role-playing, mental and physical exercise, and improvisational comedy. Certified Angus Beef provides wellness consultations by an on-site clinical psychologist. Employees do not have to leave to access these services. They hold lunchtime learning sessions to reduce stigma about mental health and the services available to employees. They offer quarterly guided imagery relaxation sessions to reach stress management strategies. Now, this on-site clinical psychologist, again, is another one that a lot of people are using. They're finding that they're just keeping a psychologist on retainer, and yeah, that sounds like it might be expensive, but what they're finding is that the employees are able to confidentially go to this psychologist and get on-site therapy, and they're seeing the bottom line actually improving, even though they're paying a little extra money on the front end for the services of a licensed professional. So that's become one that's seen definitely signs of success. The Houston Texans football team organization, they provide comprehensive and integrated physical, mental, and behavioral health insurance coverage, including around-the-clock access to employee assistance program services. They extend EAP access to anyone living in the employee's home, so it's not just for the employee, but also their family members. And they have dedicated programming for those who are caring for children or elderly parents. So those are just a few examples of some companies, what they are specifically been doing. So like any relationship, the key, of course, is communication. Openly engaging, discussing, and being proactive about mental health can help reduce the stigma and remove barriers to seeking support. Then one thing I just wanted to mention, I know we got about 10 minutes. I just want to, in about 10 minutes, I wanted to, a few other things that are a little simpler that you can do as an organization in terms of dealing with, a weary and fatigued workforce is have small group meetings, lunches, things like that. They have things that are called reach out programs where they're just basically you just call and check in. I mean, you'd be amazed at how important it would be for somebody to pick, okay, I'm gonna pick 10 people today. I'm just gonna call them. They're working remotely. I'm gonna call them and see how they're doing, even if I just have to leave a message. And I'm thinking about you, want you to know that we care, just want to make sure everything's great. If you need anything, it's an acknowledgement, just a simple acknowledgement that you care about the employees. And if you're a person that needs a phone call, then hopefully maybe we all could use a phone call like that, right? So hopefully you would be getting one of those phone calls too. So reach out programs are important. In terms of practical applications for what I do as a lawyer, again, oftentimes we don't get a case, we don't get contacted until there's already been a claim made by somebody who perhaps had a mental health issue and is claiming a mental health disability, harassment, discrimination. So all I can tell you is that, when you're thinking about what to do, if you are in charge of your organization and you do have the ability to perhaps implement some programs to help in this issue, and you're thinking whether, you're wondering or questioning whether or not it's a good idea, I can just tell you that, when a person is a former employee, whether they've been terminated or they resigned or quit, they obviously can bring a claim against their former employer. And when they go seek a lawyer, I've done plenty of plaintiff work. So on the other side, I've represented employers, but I've also represented employees. And I've listened to people's stories and experiences. And every claim, when I talk to folks, even if they don't even have a good, if I consider them to not have a good claim or a case, every element of these types of cases, there's just a feeling that they're unsupported. And you can say, well, that's great, Blake. It's a feeling. Who cares? They're delusional or they're wrong or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're still going to bring a claim against you, and it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to defend it, even if you have insurance. So what I'm telling you is that because every claim has this element of feeling unsupported, it may be unreasonable and their complaints may have no merit, but that won't always stop them from making a claim. And so plaintiff lawyers, what they do is they sit these people down and they have a discussion with them, and they start asking them questions. And when they start asking them questions, if this former employee says things like, well, they had a program in place to deal with mental health, and well, they had an on-site psychologist, and well, they had this break room that we could go to, and well, yeah, they really did, they made phone calls, and they did all these things to support. The plaintiff lawyer is going to go, the plaintiff lawyer is not going to like that. And they'll be less inclined to take a case like that because they don't like a culture of support or psychological safety, because that then lowers the value of their case and lowers their ability to win in that lawsuit. So just from a practical standpoint, it may be more resources that you might have to invest into dealing with this issue, but in the long run and on the back end, you're going to find that there will be less claims, there will be less cost associated with it. So I always recommend that you just try to get out in front of it. It's always better to paying a little money on the back end, on the front end, than to pay a lot of money on the back end. So that's the practical application of that. We could talk forever about other cases and things like that, but at the end of the day, hopefully, I've been able to, impart some information to you that will encourage, and then I will encourage you to consider dealing with mental health and mental illness in your workplace, and hopefully implement some programs that will help and support your employees. So that's all I got.
You want to open it up for questions?
Sure, that'd be great.
If you have questions, please unmute yourself, and we'll leave this open for questions for the next few minutes.
Hi, Blake.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hi,
I can.
Dr. Sarah Gilman. I do happen to be a mental health professional and a business owner. So I actually was just typing this, but I want to say thank you so much, because to have a non-mental health professional talk about these very important issues and concerns in a forum where there's business owners, and this is the trend where we're heading, is to be concerned about one another. And also the focus on skill building and building resilience and having, consultants that businesses can tap into. We have contracts with a number of businesses and cities. So I just want to say thank you. You did a fabulous job.
Well, thank you.
And most importantly, the personal touch. And this is what breaks through the stigma that is, hundreds of years old. If we just keep talking about it and then put some things in place, then we have some greater hope for the future. And just remembering that we all need to talk openly and positively about resilience. After this last year, we're all, even your best mental health professionals, are weary and tired and sick of homeschooling. And so we have shared this experience, but we're not all having the same experience. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the kind words. And maybe you and I can get together and collaborate on some things, because I'm by no means an expert, but I've done my fair share of cases now involved in this issue, and have done a pretty good deep dive into the topic, because it's dear to me. So I appreciate that, though.
And proactive and prevention are really the best things that we can possibly do. So Thanks again.
Sure, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Kathy, did you want to just share that there's another?
Yes,
yeah,
of course. We have another workshop coming up shortly. Dr. Sarah Gimlin is one of our speakers. Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about it? And this is also regarding mental health, and but it's going to be from the health professionals' perspective on this one, mental health in the workplace as well. So
no, I was trying to punt it to you. No, but that's okay. We're going to really piggyback on what was talked about today, and then give some very specific tools, techniques to use, some what we call hacks, and to be able to use on a daily basis. So we'll be talking about resilience and what's kind of worn us all out, and why, and how we can restore ourselves in the coming year and forever, really. I think that's February 25th at 4.
yeah, I'm double checking that right now.
With Leela as well.
Right.
And it is sponsored by the Ready Carlsbad Business Alliance. It's a chamber committee that works on disaster mental health and supporting businesses. And this is really about the phase of we're moving into recovery now from all of this in the last year. And what can we do to really recover? Not just, time doesn't heal all. It's what you do with the time that can help restore your health and well-being, mentally, physically, spiritually. So that's a little bit what we'll touch base on in February.
And I'll make sure everybody on this call gets an invitation.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you, Blake, so much for being here today. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate this. If you'd like to share this video, it'll be available on our website in the next few days under our webinar tab. So, please share this if you have any other employers or employers that would benefit from this. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It was very nice to meet everyone. Appreciate
Blake, if you had a one page of some of those amazing stats that you had, like, 1 in 4, suffer from, I think that would be a great addition to the journal, the chamber, and also to all of us.
Okay. I'd be happy to do that.
All right.